All right. All there we go. I can see you again. Yay. Okay. So let me do one other thing and then okay. Yay. All right, let's begin with our touchstones to create this trusting circle where we can share our lives and share our stories, especially our spiritual stories we're going to share today. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, good. So we just jump around. Whoever wants to read one of these aloud, go for it.
Be 100% present.
It's never share or die.
Listen no fixing. Oh.
Extend and presume hospitality.
Suspend judgment.
No fixing. Sorry, Isabel. Okay, Isabel gets the next one. Whichever one she wants to read next. You want to read one next, Isabel?
Respect silence.
Oh, there you go. You were modeling that for us.
Work to recognize your privileges.
Speak your truth.
Identify assumptions.
Be open to new discoveries.
When things get difficult, turn to wonder.
Identify assumptions.
And maintain confidentiality. Isabel, maybe I can send these to you and you could send them back to me in French. Then I can add them. We got to work on our French, ladies, because when we go to France, that's what they speak. So, we'll work on it. We're making her not only speak, but also read English. Okay, so our time together today will be similar to our other times. We'll just do our check-in and then go right into our meditations. I'm going to share a little bit after our spiritual stories, after we each get a chance to share our spiritual stories. We should each have about 10 minutes to share our spiritual stories. So maybe a little bit longer. We'll check our time and then we'll look at next time. Okay. So this was an image that I shared. I think you might have seen it in our last session, but if anybody was using it to reflect upon in these last couple of weeks, is there anything you want to share about this before we go into our silence? Anything you notice or wonder about?
She almost looks like she's only energy.
It's like very diffuse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially the lower part of her body.
Yeah.
Keep trying to figure out what it is she's on. Is it the Shroud of Turin? I don't know. Magic carpet.
To me, it's fascinating that the angelic forms are more substantial than she is. And it made me think about the way in which that sense of presence is so tangible when one has it.
It took me a while to see, I believe she's naked under there. So
Mhm.
that took me a while to see the first time I saw. This is the image that is on the front of Jeannie Leloux's Gospel of Mary Magdalene. It is from the 14th century. I'm not sure. I don't remember where it comes from though. It must be painted somewhere on like a building. Do you know, Isabel? On a dome or something?
Yes, it's in Italy because it's Giotto. I think it's in a church. And, yes,
That's what I figured.
it looks like the way she's represented in France with her hairs very as clothes, hiding nudity, you say in English?
uh-huh. And the long flowing red hair. I believe he's trying to represent, because I think I've read about this a little bit. I think Megan Watterson talks about it. I believe he's trying to represent this moment that it's believed when Mary Magdalene is lifted. There could be possibly two, lifted by the angels during like her prayer or meditation time. And that legend that she was lifted by the angels 7 times a day to the peak, where I understand Isabel has hiked in the dark to ring in a new year at the Chapelle de Pilon, right? Chapelle de Pilon.
Chapelle du Saint-Pilon, oui.
You say it better than me. So, but it also, there's a legend where when the Magdalene knew that she was going to pass from this realm to the next, the legend in St. Maximin is that she actually was lifted by the angels and brought to St. Maximin in St. Maximin La Santa Baume, where Isabel lives. And she and I just drove by the statue the other day on our way into town, where there's a statue where supposedly she was placed by the angels, and she had been like communicating with Saint Maximin, like telepathically, you probably would say, or through meditation, that she was coming, and so that he met her there on the plain outside of well, at the edge of the town, and there took her in. Of course, the church says gave her last rites, right? Extreme unction, so that she was properly in her sacramental preparation for leaving this realm. And then she passed, which is how it's explained her remains are in the crypt of St. Maximin. So it could also be that moment, but I think the idea being I think when we are in that state of prayer, we are in that state of meditation, the angels, who I have heard described in this realm of Mary Magdalene as the like higher thoughts or the higher consciousness, is what the angels represent, that they come and they lift us, to transcend above. Now that's a very masculine way of spirituality, right? That we need to be lifted out of this world and away from our physical mother, is sort of the masculine, traditionally called the masculine path of spirituality, whereas the feminine path seeks to remain immanent and present and grounded in the earth. So lots of mystery around this painting, but anything else anybody makes of it or wonders about it? I probably have said it before, but I think the nakedness, which we have confused with oh, that must be evidence that she used her body to, her feminine wiles to entice males. I think the nakedness is actually showing that she had reached that place of the integration of the ego and the soul, or that the soul is being liberated. And it's that return, if you will, when we are no longer attached to those ego or climates or powers, that there is this purity of heart, right? There is this purity of being, and we have nothing to hide. So we like even shed the clothes. In the dream world, clothes is a representation of persona, the ways that we present ourselves to the world, what we put on to be out there in the world. And so that we can kind of be totally shed even of that, which in the Judeo-Christian story, supposedly those first creatures that are in balance with one another are naked and totally in bliss. So that's another thing I see when I see this. So I'm hoping that as we move into our time of meditation, that we feel that, you know, I don't know if you're going to feel lifted by the angels or if it's going to feel more like a wrestling match with the angels. But one of the beautiful things I read while I was in France, by one of my new favorites, Clark Strand, who is not necessarily writing about the Magdalene, he's writing about, oh, Isabel might have dropped off. She is on her mobile phone, I think. So she may be having, she's back, connection problems. But Clark Strand says, he writes about the path of the rose, actually, the return to darkness, the return to our mother, a very deep echo spirituality that he's writing. And he says that wherever domination is present, the soul flees. So taking that into our meditation time, this is not like a forced time of trying to connect. This is more that open-handed, open-hearted, just let it be kind of experience. Because wherever we seek to dominate or control in any way, the soul actually will flee, which might explain the culture in which we're living. Wherever we're about domination, the soul flees. So, all right, so are we ready to meditate? We will return to the love that is in us. Just through entering our heart space, we're going to seek to unite with our soul. I have to move my chair before I have to always look or I run over my dog. That is longing to unite with us. So one thing that a couple of us have talked about is let's begin this time of meditation really focusing on our feet before we move into focusing on our heart and energizing our heart space. So let's take a few deep breaths and maybe even breathe down deep into the bottom of your feet. Somewhere under us, all of us, is the earth, this beautiful soil that holds us. The dust of life that actually needs us, that needs the phosphorus of our bodies, of our bones, to be nourished and able to continue to produce. As we become aware of the soles of our feet, of the bottom of our feet, begin to invite the energy of the earth, that connection to take place there in the bottom of our feet. As incarnate human beings, as those who have become enfleshed in this world for this time and this place, We remember that our soul really does long to be here on this soil under our feet. Let us honor the gift of being alive. And as we feel that energy under us, we can invite it to just make its way, climb its way up through our feet, through our shins and our calves, energizing our knees that carry such a load each and every day for every one of us. Continues to climb up our legs, through our hamstrings, which many of us need flexibility and strength in them, through our quadriceps, into our hips, into our pelvic floor. This energy of our mother, of the earth beneath us, coming into our sacral area, our womb. This ability to give life that connects us as women deeply with the world. Let the energy continue to climb, to move up our torso, to give extra attention to our solar plex. This place that needs to be so imbalanced. It's part of the energetic system that seeks to control and dominate when it is imbalanced, or that feels as if it is a victim and needs to be rescued, to be saved. Let's energize that with the rich energy of the earth, that we might be fully imbalanced, able to be empowered as these beautiful creatures that we are. We invite the energy then to be in our heart space. It is here where the energies of the universe beyond us and the energies of the earth beneath us come together, where we are able to love deeply, starting with ourselves, being in harmony with all that is. And where our soul longs to meet us, to show us again who we are and how we can live free. And so in these moments of quiet, we long to be united with our soul that is pleading to connect with us. If there's any thought that arises that distracts us from this moment, we can just return to our breath, setting that intention to return to the love that is in us. We might even hold on to something lightly in our hand, maybe a rock, maybe a rosary, maybe a seed, maybe an egg, anything that we can hold lightly in our hand that will give us that sensation of being united with our soul. This fragile, indestructible energy of love that dwells in us. Before we depart this time of stillness, I invite you to place one hand upon your heart if you have not yet. And if you can feel that heat of your heart, hopefully it has expanded and strengthened a little bit in this time. And if you will offer your soul the most gratitude, the most genuine thank you you can. Even feeling as if you have wrapped your arms all the way around this great big entity called your soul. You're able to embrace in great thanksgiving. In this state of gratitude, let your soul speak one last word to you. Knowing that we hear the voice of God through our own soul. If we could take another deep breath, deep into our feet, bringing awareness back to our toes, maybe even moving them a little bit, rocking our feet back and forth, toe to heel on the earth under us. One last great big thank you for this time and a commitment that we will in fact return to receive the love that dwells within us. And when you are ready, I invite you to open your eyes. See these other beautiful beings that are with us in the circle. Yay. I'm going to see if I can actually call Isabel on WhatsApp, if that will make it any easier for her to at least listen. She does not seem to be answering. Okay. So I'm going to invite us between now and the next time we meet, whenever we do this heart-centered meditative practice, maybe literally get an almond and hold it in your hand, or any kind of seed that you might hold in your hand, just as that representation that your self, your lowercase s self and your capital case S self, your ego and your soul have united. And in that seed, there's great potential, right? There's the ability for anything to grow from there. So before we go into our shares, here we are, Isabel and I, at the Cave of Eggs. Yay! The opening to the Cave of Eggs, at least. And I wanted to make sure that we just each had any words or any thoughts that we think of when we hear divine feminine? Just kind of put it into the circle. So we have at least kind of a working definition. And there's a method to my madness in this, because I want us to be able to begin to identify in our spiritual stories where the divine feminine has actually been present, that maybe we did not know it was. So how would you define the divine feminine? Just like a word or anything that you would.
I think fierce gentleness.
Fierce gentleness. I'm going to write these down. I use words like with, right? The divine feminine is actually with, eminent, present. I think of the divine feminine in a circle, right? Which means that presence of cooperation and collaboration and coordinating, all of that is all a part of this divine feminine energy. I think about opening, I think about allowing. It's the energy of unknowing, right? If the masculine energy is structure and order and logic and reason and words, the feminine is dark and it is mystery. There's actually that beautiful book, The Cloud of Unknowing. That's a beautiful way to think about the divine feminine energy. It's stepping off into the mystery, right? Allowing, letting be. Anything else that, and flow, definitely flow, right? You just think of our own body. If like the bones are the structure of our physical being, all the fluids, right? The blood is definitely that feminine flow energy. We have lots of representations of the divine feminine. Maybe not necessarily all that much in the Judeo-Christian tradition as it has been taught by the Orthodox kind of way of understanding, but early on in the Judeo-Christian stories, the Shekinah, this presence that actually, in the story of Exodus, that actually like went with in the cloud and the pillar of fire, that actually is the presence of the feminine that is guiding and leading. That fierce, gentle energy, that unknowing and yet imminent with. Mirabai Starr talks about the Sabbath is a practice of welcoming the exiled Shekinah, right? Just like she literally opens her windows and invites the Shekinah to come in. So Shekinah Sabbath is about rest. It's about delight. It's about celebration. All of that is the divine feminine. It's not about rules. It's not about structure. It's not about words. It's more about the silence. Kind of like laying down the burdens. And for many of us, I think when we think of the divine feminine, we often think of this like fierce, gentle mother energy, right? So we see that in the mother of God, the Theotokos, which is known as Mary, which the church has called the Virgin. Though I heard a definition of the Virgin recently as actually the one that is totally outside the power and control of a male, of the masculine. So a woman that truly is free without those attachments to the male. So we can celebrate that. It has nothing to do with sex. So anyway, okay, so any other questions about the divine feminine or thoughts that come to mind? Life-giving is another thought for me. Okay,
everything that has to do with nature is the divine feminine.
definitely. Matter, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So here we are in our safe circle, and this experience to have a chance. I know we've shared a little bit about ourselves. I think I skipped our check-in, didn't I? Sorry about that.
Well,
But we can add our check-in here. Just wanting us to share about our spiritual backgrounds in a little deeper way. This may be something you've never done before, or you may have had to do this so many times you're sick of talking about it. But just sharing however you might look back at your life and see, like, where was there a presence or an understanding of something bigger, however you call that, whether that's God, divine, Jesus, mother, energy, whatever that might be. If there are practices that you do now that kind of keep you grounded in that or connected with that, something bigger, if you'll share those. We've talked a little bit already, but you can add in any experience with or lack of experience with Mary the Magdalene, and any way you notice her speaking in your journey. That might be a good point to like check in with what's going on. You don't have to do them in this order either. And then anything about your spiritual connections that just kind of naturally lead you into this time together of journeying with Mary the Magdalene, and an intention that you've been setting for this journey. All right. So we can do this however you all want. We can have one person share at a time, or we each can go through. Do you have a preference? We can each kind of share.
I wrote mine out
Okay.
because I didn't know how else to do it. And
Well,
I
we should
I
share
think,
the whole thing at once, right?
yeah, for me anyway. How about you, Kate? What do you think?
I didn't write mine out. I didn't hardly, I mean, I did think about it, but it'll all be extemporaneous for sure.
There you go.
Okay.
That's all right.
Okay,
Well,
it's easier for me to put it down.
read it.
Otherwise, yeah.
Yeah. And so is everybody okay that the recording continues to be
Yeah.
shared with our friends? Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So Phoebe, do you want to go first?
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
I will.
We're going to listen deeply. No questions, no crosstalk, no judgment. We're just going to listen.
Okay.
Take it in.
My spiritual background began as a child in the Episcopal Church, where at 11, I had my first felt experience of positive divine energy in front of the children's altar, surrounded by the aroma of pastel hyacinths.
Oh,
This was, quote, the cure, unquote, for my night terrors, prompted by frightening energies that I believed would take me from my bed. So church became suddenly important, and I was confirmed and subsequently married in the church. Always, I harbored deep resentment that I couldn't be an altar boy, and was confused that my mother could only serve on the altar guild, not at the altar. I led a wild married life from 17 to 40, but remained deeply connected to the church through choir and music. I raged at the patriarchy and being forbidden any role beyond music and teaching. I was unkindly contemptuous of our priests. I felt divine presence in the music, but not much else. At 40, I joined AA and experienced God in other people. The kindness and care lavished on me was mind-boggling. So AA became my church and remained so for 7 years. I learned about and felt the presence of a non-judgmental God in AA, and I learned to love and be loved in a new way. I then returned to the Episcopal Church because I didn't want my entire identity to be determined by alcoholism, and remained active for 15 years, completing EFM, singing in the choir, teaching catechesis, and chairing the Interfaith Outreach Committee. I continued to be deeply upset by the creed, the priests, the ultra-conservative bishop, and his patriarchal rulings. but somehow this was still too great a part of my identity to be able to leave, until I couldn't live with myself anymore and I left. I discovered One River Wisdom School and was an active participant in their retreats for about 10 years. I began Jungian dream work, completed Hayden's dream leader training, and made pilgrimages to India, Scotland, and Peru, during which my awareness of divine presence deepened enormously as I learned to love and accept nature, the planet, and myself more deeply. I became aware of and felt the divine feminine through nature. Yet I was still separate. My spirituality was binary, with me on the physical plane and divine energy on the celestial. There was too much 1950s childhood Christian training still in me. The great gift has been my healing touch study and practice over the past 5 years. Within that energy field, I feel one. When I put my hands on someone and love runs through me to them, because I become one with everything. I am completely at peace, yet fully energized. In a sense, I believe I become love, which is what I believe divine energy to be. I have had no experience with Mary Magdalene. I've read about Julian of Norwich, Hildegard of Bingen, and Teresa of Avila to try to understand the divine feminine. Through Bonnie Johnson, I learned a body-centering prayer that she attributes to Mary Magdalene. I have used it daily with deep gratitude. Bonnie told me she has conversed with MM since childhood. Jules gave a wonderful presentation after her first trip to the south of France, and I was fascinated by the fervor of her love for MM. I realized I don't know anything about the power of divine feminine love, yet I sense that is what moves through me when I am serving patients and nurses at hospice. Basically, I want what I see in Bonnie and Jewel. My intention is to open my body, mind, and soul to the unfolding mystery and to be a blessing to all beings. I sense the divine feminine experience through MM may be the path that leads me there.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So every step of the way fit into the one before, which just fascinates me. It's as if there's a pattern that was set with all of the possible things that you can do to screw it up. But it was there and I can see it and I'm so grateful. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. So well said.
Thank you.
You worked hard writing it down.
Yeah, it's easier for me to write things down than to speak. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, how do I stop even begin?
However you want.
I was raised an Irish Catholic, and God, church, prayer was very, very important in our family. And in school, I know as a, I don't know, third, fourth, fifth grader in our Catholic school, at lunchtime, some of us, and at times I was a leader, would go to the Grotto of Mary and pray. And I just expected a miracle to happen. Not that I necessarily ever felt anything, but I had that expectation. I I mean, we always prayed before meals. We prayed as a community Friday night. We would say the rosary together. There were probably 13 families that we all got together every Friday and said the rosary. And some of the times it was just like, how fast can we do this? It didn't feel like prayer at all. And other times it was a holy expression. I remember I made my first communion at 7. And the night before, my dad, who was a photographer, spent all night trying to get the perfect picture with me in my first communion outfit. I remember that was not a fun time. Let's just say that. So that I was so exhausted by the time we had the first communion. I don't know that it was, I was too tired to, I don't remember it as being special.
Mhm.
I was confirmed at 8. No, I'm just, and at during that time, right before, right after confirmation, my grandmother was in the hospital dying, and those days we couldn't go see people. So somehow or another, I got to see her through the ground floor window, and that was extremely important. I had no idea she was dying then, but I just remember it very, very distinctly. And I don't know that she knew I was there because she had so much pain. She was either on mega medicine or screaming. So when I saw her, she wasn't screaming. As you were talking, I was thinking, how do I say this? Because I don't remember. I know that as a junior in high school, I was just really struggling, and somehow or another decided that I would become a nun. Oh, it was okay. And I was exploring that. And so the weekend that John Kennedy was killed, I was at a Franciscan convent in southern Iowa, where it was the most, I mean, for anybody, it was awful. However, I was in a convent with 2 or 3 other girls, but there were where we were because of the assassination. We were in rooms with almost no light. There was we didn't get to see we didn't have to, we went for a tour, but we didn't get a tour. I left out that I have an aunt that was a nun. I have great aunts that were an aunt that was a Benedictine. I had a great aunt that was a Dominican nun. I have a cousin who is a Trappist monk. I have a great uncle who was a Jesuit priest. So it felt right to choose that for myself. And since the Franciscan trip did not go so well, I said, well, I will see what I can do about joining the Benedictines. And there was a community in Yankton. I remember because when I was born, my aunt was 18 and just going into the convent. And I remember visiting her several times as a kid. And she was just so amazing. Love personified, always. And that's who I wanted to be. So I visited that community, and it was so huge. I absolutely knew I would be totally lost. And so I decided that I would enter, if allowed, to the convent in Cottonwood, Idaho, where Mary Claire was, because she had transferred to a different community. I'd never been to Idaho, had no idea except on a map where that was and what it was. And I remember on December 4th of 64, I told my parents, and my mother was furiously angry. And I said, that's what I'm going to do, because that day I got accepted by the community. So I knew I could go. I didn't let her know that I was even interested until then. Finally, she came around and was very supportive. So in August of the next year, Mom and Dad drove me out to Idaho. I mean, we led such a small town, isolated life that for me to go to a restaurant, even to buy a hamburger, I didn't know what a chef salad was. And so along the way, I wanted a hamburger and I wanted a chef salad. And she said, well, which one do you want first? And I said, I would like the hamburger first. And then she brought me the salad that was humongous. No, maybe it was the other way around. I just remember that salad was the biggest salad I'd ever seen in my life, because we just didn't hardly have salad at home, and we surely never ate it out. When we ate out, we ate the same every time. It was hot roast beef sandwiches with mashed potatoes and green beans. Wherever we went, that's what we all got, because that's what they ordered for it. So as we got to St. Gertrude's, here's this great big, I'm going to say 30 steps up to the opening door. I'm thinking, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Because the building is huge, made of stone. It's and surrounded by huge 100-year-old evergreens. It was beautiful, but scary. And I don't remember anything of that day other than I got there say goodbye to my parents. And I knew I'd see them the next morning after breakfast, but then they would be going home. They'd spend some time with Sister Mary Claire. So that was that. And then it was a much an up and down life. I loved the liturgy and the quietness of liturgy there, whether it was at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I am not a morning person. They gave us 20 minutes to take a shower and get ready and be down in chapel. And Lordy, I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And this is really not what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm doing a life review.
That's all right.
I guess the time as in preparation for becoming a nun was so full of God and absolutely, God, what do you want me to do? This doesn't feel right. This feels, then it felt so right. And, you know, when I would talk to people, they say, well, that's normal to have doubts. You know, I should have just listened to myself, but I didn't know myself well enough to listen. So, before I made final vows, I did a 30-day retreat, and that was a really special time in that I had some really holy moments of presence. And I was reassured that this was the right thing to do now. So I made final vows, and then I was supposed to teach. And I loved the aspect of sharing love with the students, but I was not a teacher. And I guess as I became a social worker, that aspect of sharing presence was so important in my life that even though when I meditated, I didn't necessarily feel a thing, I knew that's what I had to do. And I was in Idaho until 1982, when I came to St. Louis to go to school to get a master's in social work. Well, I had worked in southern Idaho, which is about 95 or 6% Mormon. So when I came to St. Louis, which was at that time very, very Catholic, I felt like I was being what's the word? Can't think of the word. Being almost drowned by the Catholicism that didn't, it was so different. And the same. The good thing was I got to go to Mass at college church, which had a lot of the music of the St. Louis Jesuits, which I loved. And music is such a way to know the and feel God for me. But I remember the first or the second Good Friday there, I almost couldn't go to mass, a church, because it just felt wrong.
Mm.
And I don't know exactly. And then it was okay, but it was something that was really um, I don't know what the word is. Strange, we'll just say. And then everything was fairly okay until a few years later when I was out of school and working and doing parish liturgy that I just really never liked. Never. And I had several instances where the parish priest would stop whatever liturgy they were doing and admonish or I'll just say admonish parishioners for having noisy kids or doing
Mm.
whatever. And I mean, when it happened once, I left that parish and I went down to College Church again. I had to drive like 30 miles to get there, but that was important. And then I just quit. I just couldn't do it anymore. And then in 96, I met a friend at Healing Touch, and she said, "Oh, you got to come to Cronin's. It's beautiful." Well, Cronin's was beautiful. It had great music, but uh, I went there for a couple of years, and then I couldn't make myself go. The last time I went, I got there after the gospel, and I said, "You know what? You don't want to be there. Why are you going?" And I didn't go. Well, about 3 weeks later, I found out that that pastor was abusing kids.
Oh.
And it's like, I could feel it. I just didn't know it. During that time, one of the people that I had been in the convent with was very much into Native American spirituality. She too left. And we remained good friends. She entered the same day I did, like 20 minutes after I did. So I was older in rank. She was older in age. And today is her birthday, so I just want to honor her.
Oh.
She died 3 years ago. So I just, for a long time, I started Healing Touch in 96, and I did all 4 levels, one right after another, but the thought of going to level 5, I just couldn't do. Because I was working like 10, 12, 14-hour days every day trying to, because I was slow at what I did, but I also did way more than I should have. And so in 91, I started hospice. And that was a blessing. And I truly believe that time that I saw my grandmother, that day, the hospice bug bit. I just didn't know it. I just knew I had to be in hospice.
Yeah.
So it was a holy time to be there and to be privileged to be able to do healing touch for a lot of those patients, as well as my social work. A lot of days were really God days. And as much as I love it, my boss called me the other day, we're going to hire another social worker. Do you want to come back? I said no, without a doubt. But I love that work. It was really giving, and I know that people got a lot, so that was good. And you know what? I met Jewel when level 4, the second time around, and I had been meditating off and on, but really inconsistent. Until then. And then on level 5, my mentor said to all of us in class, you need to have spiritual direction. And I said, okay, I'll do it for the class, with no intention of ever keeping it up. And it's been a blessing. And I thank you, Jewel.
You're welcome.
So that's it. And what do I want to say? In the last couple of months, I've been blessed to experience Mary Magdalene a couple times, and Mary as well. And I don't know, for the last year, I've gone back to saying the rosary, which I remember we were doing a procession up to our grotto, and I don't know what happened on the inside of me. I just remember I'm not going to say the rosary again. I have no idea what I was doing. And then all of a sudden, it felt very important to do. So it's part of the path, and we'll just see what happens. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. That was gorgeous.
And God is good.
Mhm. Mm.
And you did leave the convent at some point. Did you say that?
Oh, no, I didn't. I left in 87. I was having physical problems that looked like MS. And my superior said, do you want to take a leave of absence? Within 6 weeks, those symptoms left, and I didn't have MS, but they didn't know what I had. And it was just stress.
You had the freedom bug.
Yeah, yeah.
So beautiful. Okay, me. So my spiritual connection really began right there, which is part of why I use this picture in my background. I grew up on the shores of Lake Michigan, and it was there where I first really felt I was I mean, I can remember my little swimsuit and everything. My mama had made me this little two-piece, green and pink and like cream, you know, it was the 70s. So I just remember feeling like the sun on my shoulders and the sand on my feet and just the beauty of the trees. Like Michigan, you know, we're also in the woods, and so it's, you know, a northern forest, if you will. So the evergreens and just all of the, I mean, all sorts of trees there. And I just like felt one, like I just felt this unity, united. I had no idea that was God at the time, but it did definitely feel like all was well. I was probably about 7 when I first sort of had those, when I kind of first had those awarenesses, and my family was very religious. Our hometown, Oostburg, Wisconsin, is a very small place. It's grown a little bit in the last decade or so, but it's a enclave of Hollanders who left the Netherlands and came in like the late 18th century, early 19th century to come and find a new way in America. So they created a very constricted little, very tight community of Dutch folk, where if you're not Dutch, you're not much. That's the motto of the town. The diversity I experienced was what shade of blonde you might have, how blue your eyes were, that kind of thing. But my family got out often because my sister, I'm the youngest of 5. We were not Catholic. I'm the youngest of 5. My parents were married yesterday, 67 years ago. So in 1956, they were kind of tail end of the Depression, sort of survivors. Both of their fathers had come from Holland as small boys. So my mom is an Army brat, and my dad basically lived within a 5-mile radius of where he was born his whole life. So but my mother lived in various places in the world as an Army brat, and she had gorgeous red hair and the personality to boot with it, like just the spitfire, the feisty, the sassy, which is what immediately drew my dad to her. So they had a very I'll just say feisty relationship, deeply loving, but very explosively feisty, never violent, just, you know, just loud. So boisterous, big. And my father grew up in part in the farm and in part on the shores of Lake Michigan as well, the same area. This is actually Nyheis Beach you're looking at. And his grandfather sort of bought it as a farmer and used it for logging in the middle of the winter. So one of the best things we used to do is climb on the rocks. My mom always said we weren't allowed to do it, but we spent a lot of time on this beach. We would hunt for arrowheads. You know, we heard all sorts of stories of the natives that had lived on the shores. They were smart enough to not stay in the winter. They would migrate. So in the winter. So my home experience was, I would say, loving, supportive, and yet as sort of the youngest of 5 and an empath and one of the quieter sisters among us and more easygoing sisters among us, it was a emotionally challenging childhood for me. My middle sister was and still is to this day what was diagnosed at the time as severely mentally retarded, so both physically and mentally and every way possible. Amazing, she's still alive. By the time she was 4, she needed to be put in a state institution. We just couldn't care for her. My mom couldn't care for her, and I was the middle child. No, she was the middle child, and I'm the youngest. There's a 14-year spread between the oldest and youngest, so my 2 older sisters had a very different childhood experience than I did. But from early days, we would go once a month when I was a kid. We would never talk about my sister Jane. It was it very much was like that secrecy of like an alcoholic type family where you sort of don't ask, don't tell. And yet she was such a part of our lives. So it was very confusing to me as a kid. I think it's part of what kind of encouraged this quest for knowing my life and this curiosity, because I never really understood what had happened. I didn't know the stories. I hadn't lived through it. And yet every month we would go and like visit her, and my parents would make it like this fun time in Madison, Wisconsin. So we had to travel about 4 hours. Now it's like a 3-hour with the interstates, but about a 4-hour drive. We would often stay overnight in a hotel. Most people that I grew up with had never done anything like that. Many of them had never left the county until maybe they, did something really special or something like that. So we went. I mean, we got out often. My mom, having the background she did, was much more open to diversity, I guess you would say. And they both love to travel. So they made that a part of our lives, even though we were going to this situation where I just remember thinking as a very young kid, what does it mean to be a human being? Like, these are like weird questions for a kid to be asking, I think, because I would see people that had like water on the brain. They were like totally deformed looking. They just would grunt and not be able to move, have no control over their bodies. And those were the people that I would see. And that was my sister. So like, it just was very confusing. I always hated going there. And then I would feel guilty that I hated going there, that whole thing. So it was very awkward and uncomfortable to be there. And yet I really trace that sense of like those deep theological questions. I didn't really know that's what I was asking, but it was really like asking, like, what is the nature of being a human being? And like, how does something like this even happen? And when I kind of kept having run-ins with the church. We were Presbyterian. At that point, the Northern Presbyterians had united with the Southern Presbyterians after the Civil War. They finally got back together in like the 80s. But my hometown had always been much more constricting than the Presbyterian Church USA. So it had always had struggles with the hierarchy of the Presbyterian Church USA, because the hierarchy of the Presbyterian Church USA, Milwaukee Presbytery, was incredibly progressive, open to women's service. Some of the first women that were ordained in the Presbyterian Church USA were part of Milwaukee Presbytery. Our first like moderator of our national church who was a woman, was from Milwaukee Presbytery. But that was like so foreign to my home church. It was just this very constricting. I just used the word constricting. There's a box, there's a question, there's an answer. You just parrot back the answer. And I used to always ask questions, which used to really drive my Sunday school teachers crazy because I always knew the answer that they wanted, but then I always would ask more questions and they were like, it's not in the book, stop asking questions. So that was my childhood. I admit there were times as kids we were sort of obnoxious. Church life was the center of our world, really, but my biggest center of my world was sports. I was an athlete. I was going to be the first female Harlem Globetrotter. That was my goal. I was going to slam dunk a basketball. I was very assertive, very aggressive, actually. And I grew super fast. I was almost 6 feet tall by the time I was in 5th grade. So, I was kind of recruited for sports, if you will. Large bone, big bone, strong person. Became a hitter in volleyball, like all these very aggressive things that are very hard on your body. So, I lifted weights. I was all about being in shape, running. I mean, I would go to the weight room before school just to like get an extra workout in before, even though we had 3 hours of practice later that day. I was just like obsessed. So I always have to be obsessed about something. So, anyway, so in the middle of all of that, I did often feel very, very alienated from people, but I always felt very connected to this beach, to this land. And this is still our home. And also to our pets, like my cat and my dogs. They were like my best friends. Whenever I had a rough day at school, I would come home and like bury my face, my black cat that I had, and her name was Midnight, and just, cry and carry on. My parents would be like, stop crying, stop crying. So it was that kind of a childhood, I guess you would say. In fifth grade, we were in a Bible class because we would go on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and then there was choir rehearsal every week as well. So we spent a lot of time at the church building, and I don't know what we were talking about, but the pastor made a proclamation. He was a guest pastor from the next little Dutch town over, and he made the proclamation that anybody who does not say the words, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, will burn in hell for all eternity. And I got a little panicked about that as a fifth grader who was going all the time to see people like my sister and, you know, asking, well, what about this? What about that? What about that? And he was like, no, Jewel, it's very clear in the Bible. And I finally said, what about my sister? And he's like, if she hasn't said the words, Jesus Christ is her Lord and Savior, she will burn in hell for all eternity. And this really worried me. The structure of that town was the pastor was, number one, the highest educated generally, and also like the highest, most respected authority. What the pastor said was like the word of God. So I kind of bought into all that. I was incredibly upset by that. I did go home and mention it. Normally I wouldn't talk about such things, but I did go home and I was just so distraught. I asked my mom, like, Mom, is Jane gonna like burn in hell for all eternity? She hasn't said Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior. And my mom just simply said, Jewel, we believe God's grace is bigger than that. That's all she said. And just was so moving to think like she gave me that assurance. And I saw my mom continue to love and respect and believe that her child Jane is included in all of this, that her life is not wasted, and that she too is a child of God, is the kind of language my mom would use. So thankfully my mother gave a really positive answer, or I might have gone a whole different way. I had more run-ins with the church. I had that experience of feeling very united, and I really just had this sense of like, I got to do something, but I got to like make a commitment or whatever. And so I asked literally, like, can I make a commitment? Can I be confirmed? They're like, no, you're too young to understand. You don't know. You can't do that. Then I was like 8 at the time. It was very structured church. So we weren't allowed to go through a confirmation class, a year-long confirmation class, till I was 18. So here I was at 8 wanting to make this commitment to God or love or whatever this was. And they're like, you don't understand, which even fueled that curiosity bug a little bit more. So I did that whole like, okay, well, I'm going to understand. And, you know, I would read the Bible all the time and try to figure it out. My grandmother was dying of cancer as well, very painful ovarian cancer in the 80s. Not a lot of treatments for her. So I was seeing like this beautiful, devoted woman who had put up with a lot of shit in her life, basically. And she's like dying this very painful death. And it just was like, why, God? Why are you making this happen? This is kind of the mindset I had. So why does somebody so good have to suffer so bad? So I would always be seeking answers. She did pass away the day after my 16th birthday. So there was a lot of loss throughout my childhood. My grandparents, my great-grandparents all were a part of my life, and they just one after the other, every year or so, another one was dying. And sort of there was a lot of death in my childhood, a lot of loss, a lot of that sense of abandonment of people who really had been very loving and kind of, though they were a part of this culture, they weren't really like that culture. There was some ways that they were like that, but they were never like that with me. So let's put it that way. So anyway, I went off like some sports again. I won't tell all about that, but sports was a big deal. It was always like, okay, God, help me like get this goal or whatever. And I went off to college. It was crazy. Y'all would have hated me, but I went off to college to play volleyball. Actually, I was just wanting to be a lawyer and play volleyball. That's what I wanted to do. Well, neither of those came about. Fast forward to, I end up in Jamaica. It was one of my first times traveling the world by myself on the sports mission trip. And I have this experience, we're supposed to be like converting the heathens. That's really what we were there to do. It's terrible, terrible, terrible. But God got in, and I, for the first time in my life, experienced people who were living in like extreme poverty. I had never seen poverty in a place like Oostburg. There's like no wealth and there's no extreme poverty. There's no, it's just middle class folk, and we're all kind of the same. And as far as I knew, nobody was hungry or anything like that. Now that's changed since the time I was younger. And maybe that was there and I didn't know it, but to see very dark-skinned people who had to wear white gloves in order to serve what looked like to be very opulent white people on beaches was very shocking to me. So I was in this really kind of fragile space. And one time when we had to go out and pray and read our Bibles, I was overlooking Montego Bay, and I just heard this voice saying, saying, Jewel, help me do something about this. Help me bridge the gap. And to me, that ended up being a call to ministry, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. But, I was like, no, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a kick-ass lawyer in DC. And I'm going to be like changing laws and, having a hot black lover. I had a whole image of what I was going to do and be. Well, none of that came about. So I would sort of make these bargains with God along the way. So I did end up having that experience of like sharing my time in Jamaica and what I had experienced and what I was learning. And here, I didn't really share that I was hearing voices, but I had a chance to do that in our worship service. And in those moments just felt like, this is it. This is what I need to be doing with my life. It's like sharing about the love of God. So I started the process towards ordination. I changed my theology, my political science major to theology. My professor at this Lutheran university wasn't really happy about that, but he's like, okay, if you're leaving me for God, I guess it's okay. My college years were tumultuous in that it was a Lutheran school that was very controlled by the Missouri Synod Lutherans, which are very against women, very literalist Bible understanding people. But yet there was a couple of professors there who were supportive, one that was a female, and had said, let me make a call. So I ended up at Vanderbilt Divinity School, fast forwarding there, where by that time in the ordination process, I was so done. The pastor was convinced I was going to go to hell if I followed this path. I mean, I kept getting damned to hell all the time. And I sort of took that serious at that point in time. Now I'm like, let's go have fun. I ended up in ministry so many times where I was like, I'm not doing this. I don't want to do this. Please let me leave this. But here I still am. And I think I've shared a little bit before about, I think it's probably about 15 years ago now, where, I have every friggin' educational academic degree that I can get, pretty much. And so I've done that whole path of like, I'm going to learn, I'm going to know. You tell me I don't know, I don't understand, well, I'm going to figure it out. So I've been on that path for a very long time. Believe that's kind of put in there by that early imprint of the church saying I can't understand. So I have a little bit of my mom's energy in me. I have a little bit of that feisty Mary Magdalene energy in me. My middle name is Madeline, so I've been trying to figure that out too. But about 15 years ago, I was at that kind of point in life where it's like, really, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I've just always wanted to be a spiritual director. Doesn't make any sense. You can't make money on it. It's just doesn't, it's like not very pragmatic, if you will. And yet I just had always wanted to do that. I always had a spiritual director throughout my formation and ministry. And so I ended up going to Hayden Institute, and that felt like it was going to be a little bit beyond what I was comfortable with. It was definitely outside of the Presbyterian Church, which Vanderbilt was as well. That wasn't a problem for me. So I kind of had a sense like, okay, this is going to take me in a different direction, and it has, and I'm grateful. I didn't think I would do dream work, and I went ahead and did that thanks to Healing Touch. And I was doing what was called Credo at the time as well. It's something like they'd have mid-career pastors go, and in the Presbyterian Church, at least, I know multiple denominations do this. But go and like really discern, have time away, like what is it you believe and what do you believe you're called here to do and be. And I envisioned in that time the Circle for Healing and Wholeness, which I didn't have all these trainings at the time, but I had heard them and talked to my dad about it too, and he was very supportive. So that was sort of surprising that there'd be this direction of being able to share healing touch and spiritual direction and dream work with folks. And I had a whole manifestation wheel that I had begun with Kate at level 4, and I just kept filling in. So amazingly, that's come to pass. And I lead the Circle for Healing and Wholeness. Earlier this year, after having been on the pilgrimage last year and a couple of years ago, really learning that Magdalene, my middle name, is the anglicized version, or in the French version as well, for Magdalene. And my parents have never been able to tell me why it is they've named me Jewel Magdalene. Nobody would ever call me that name. I was teased by my sister because of that name, associated with, the dirty whore, Mary Magdalene, that whole thing. And yet, kind of really curious about how did I end up with this name and what does that mean for who I am and who I'm meant to be, because I believe it's a title. I don't think it's just a place in Palestine. I believe it really is a title, that it's sort of that shamanic go-between between the realms. And my last part I'm going to share is that 2 last things. Both of my parents died last year, and it worked out that, some of you might know this already, that I was able to be with them, each of them, that they live in Wisconsin. I would go to this beach all the time to get my serenity back in the middle of caring for them in those final weeks. But it was a beautiful experience with my mom. It was a very difficult experience with my dad. He had dementia and Alzheimer's, which was getting worse, and he was a totally broken man when my mom died, exited about 5.5 months before him. He could not stand it. And so his dementia and Alzheimer's got much, much worse. He was very aggressive and challenging, fighting the whole process. We never did know if he really understood he was dying. It was bad. It was all that bad stuff that can happen from the disease. But my dad also was always kind of a man like that. A lot of feistiness in him too. So that experience, and then seeing my mom coming in my dreams before my dad died, being able to share a dream or two with my dad, which he wouldn't let us talk about her, and you never knew when he was going to have like a very breakdown those 5.5 months after mom died. So it was very complicated grieving her. And so I told him I was going to tell him a dream where mom had come. And I said, I know you might be upset about it, but I need you to hear it. And so I told him that she had come, and she was just sitting at the table. She was young again in the dream. I actually said to her, oh, Mom, look at your gorgeous red hair. It's back. Because she was young again, and her hair was back, and she was in charge. She was back at her spot at the head of the table, where she always sat. My dad never sat at the head of the table. He always thought he wore the pants in the family, but he really didn't. And she was just communicating to me in that dream that okay, I'm here. And that dream actually came about 10 days before my dad died. And so I had a chance to share it with him. And I said, she's been getting everything ready for you. She's got God all lined up for you. She's waiting for you. So, and he cried, but I know it was a comfort to him as well. Well, sure enough, my mom's presence actually did come back. She came back the night I was alone with my dad. I was alone with my parents. Both of them died. My sisters, the youngest of 5, but all of them came to me one by one and said, I can't be here when she dies. I can't be here when she dies. Why wouldn't you want to be with somebody when they die? It's the holiest moment ever, I think. So I've been with a lot of people as they've died, but so it's special being able to kind of be a presence with them in that path. And so mom actually came back the night that I was alone with dad, and the nurse had said, like, it's probably, you know, you might not make it till morning, that whole thing. I just couldn't get comfortable. My dog was like barking weird ways. My sister and niece told me afterwards they had had dreams that mom was there. So I'm convinced she was there. And so I have done some reflecting on, like, it seemed very much like these two hearts that really had become one and truly were the beloveds, that were so broken when they could no longer be together, which is how I see the Magdalene and the Christ. So not to like say that my parents are like Mary Magdalene and Jesus, but it's a similar kind of energy that I saw taking place in them. And at the beginning of the year, I just said to I heard, like, if you want people to know about Mary Magdalene, you have to start teaching about Mary Magdalene now. Like 5 years from now, if you want her to be mainstream, if you will, in the church, you have to start teaching about her now. So that's when I was like, I gotta go back to France. I gotta start these groups. And like, I don't know all the answers, but I've been like reading the, you know, volumes and reflecting and looking at images and seeking wisdom, just kind of recovering what is this healthy divine and feminine energy that needs to be together, and that shows us this flow of love, that in the best moments of my parents' relationship I had a chance to see, and especially there at the end. So I'm very open at this point, because of all of it, to the interpenetration of the realms, and I'm hopeful that I know that somebody will be waiting or being a part of my passing as well when the time comes. So that's been a great comfort to me. And just this sense of like, there's such a bigger energy and line of women that were standing behind us and supporting us. So that's kind of where I'm at today. I actually have started praying the rosary. Kate's gonna be like, what? Thanks to the book, Phoebe, that I mentioned last time, which Leela had mentioned to us about The Way of the Rose. I took that book in. I've read it like 3 times. I've listened to it 3 times since last we met. I'm about to finish it again for the 3rd time. And it's talking about the feminine path, the divine feminine that's hidden in the rosary, and how the earliest people each spring would bring a garland of roses that they had strung together to the goddess. And this is where the rosary actually comes from. So I have been, that's been a practice I've been beginning, and that beautiful words reminding us in the start of that book that the first thing a child does is reaches out to hold on to its mother. And so when we take up the rosary, or that sense of like we're reaching out to hold on to our mother, it's just kind of a beautiful thought for me, especially because my physical mother has passed. And let me not romanticize them. They were difficult people. Both my parents were difficult people. So I love them dearly. And I know that nurturing mother energy that I always have longed for was never something my mom was a dissident daughter. She was feisty, and there was nothing nurturing about her, and yet she was a strong female, had a lot of run-ins herself with authorities, if you will, and so taught us to stand on our own 2 feet. And I'm grateful for that, but was never like that overly nurturing, loving presence that I always wanted and needing more of. So this is a time in my life where I'm like, how are you mothering yourself? How are you connecting with the great mother that is beyond you? So, okay, that's plenty. We're way gone over time.
Oh dear.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's all right. It was wonderful. Whoops, there's an alarm. Hold tight.
We could all go on forever, I'm sure.
Yes.
I'm going to show this one image as we depart, because, oh my gosh, I discovered this image in the crypt, this humongous crypt under the Abbey of St. Victor's in Marseille. I saw it, and I saw the Magdalene. And then I finally saw the Christ. I was like, wait, what? So I was just blown away by this
Mhm.
incredible chapel of Mary Magdalene at St. Victor's. It's right near the Chapel of Lazarus. This is just what is like carved into the wall. For me, this sense that the feminine is holding space as the masculine is crucified, which is what happens. Healthy masculine gets crucified in this world, right? So
Mhm.
the feminine holding space for the new life to come. I just couldn't believe that this was there. So I'm going to send this as our image if anybody would like to meditate with it or reflect upon it in these next couple of weeks. We will meet again on ding, 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 September 29th. So
Wonderful.
11 to 12:30. Sorry about us going a little over again.
Oh, we had to, so we could all say what we needed to say.
Yes, of course. I will be leading a workshop on September 24th. If anybody's interested, it might just be a few of us, but a workshop, Healing the Hyposcamos with Mary the Magdalene. So if you'd like to come and be a part of that standalone workshop, you're welcome to. This is something like people who may not be able to kind of normally be in an ongoing group might be interested in that. So that's on Sunday, September 24th, coming up soon, next
Yeah.
Sunday, right?
Yeah.
So you're welcome to come be a part of that. I can I'll send you information about it. All right, so as we depart, let's just kind of ground ourselves back in. Here's the Magdalene, what I think is the Magdalene, kind of taking charge and saying whatever she's trying to say to us about the intention we need to set for these next 2 weeks. So maybe just take a moment and hear that intention. And we'll draw our time to a close. I hate departing, but we have to depart. So
Mhm. Thank you both so much. This was really
Thank you.
lovely. Yeah.
we'll
Alex-
see you next time. Maybe
Yep.
we can continue to see the tracings of the divine feminine in each of our paths. So
Yeah. Hope
she's
so.
there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, ladies.
Yeah. Look forward to seeing you both again. Bye, Kate.
Yeah, bye-bye,
Bye,
Phoebe.
Jewel.
Thank you.
Love you
You're
both.
welcome.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
love you. You take care.
I will, dear.
All right, awesome.
Here's our, I gotta figure out how to get out of here now.
All righto. You have a good week.
I will. I hope you do too.
Yeah, Isabel was okay.